Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave George. I'm the Associate Director of the Release Aging People in Prison campaign. Today we are gathered in a socially distant and public health conscious way outside of Sing Sing Correctional Facility. We're on Monday, March 30th. Juan Mascaro died with COVID-19 in isolation at 58 years old. He is the first incarcerated person with COVID-19 in the New York State prison system to die. He is one of 3 incarcerated people in prison in the entire country who has died with this virus. And he should serve as a wake-up call to Governor Cuomo and state officials in New York and across the country that this pandemic has and will continue to kill people in prison, separate families and entire communities, unless the governor in New York State acts by granting executive clemency now. Unless the governor takes humane action, and the actions that public health officials, even district attorneys in some instances, community leaders, philanthropists, Congress people, and so many others have been asking him to take. To grant clemency now to older people and others who are vulnerable to this virus, vulnerable to the harm and death that this virus has already afflicted on people, incarcerated, and staff. For the love of God, Governor Cuomo, we need you to act. With many thousands of older people locked up in your 52 state prisons, and many others with serious health issues and underlying health conditions, people who are otherwise vulnerable to this virus, we need you to act. Juan Mascaro is the first, but he won't be the last unless you act. We need clemency now. We need it for people who are incarcerated. We need it for staff who work in the prisons. We need it for families and communities across our state. There are already more than 20 incarcerated people who have tested positive for the virus and more than 100 staff. And the governor's response up until this point has been forcing people incarcerated to make hand sanitizer, cutting off social visits, and putting in a few measly educational tools for people to learn about the virus. People don't have access to sick call and medical. People barely have access to tests. People are dying. So today you're going to hear from formerly incarcerated community leaders and others about why we need the governor to grant clemency now. We have signs all around us. I'm holding a sign that's a tombstone for Juan Mascaro. We have signs around us that say free our elders, that say clemency now, that say clemency is compassion. And that's what we need right now, compassion. So first up, I'm going to call the director of the Release Aging People in Prison campaign to share a few words, Jose Saldana.
Thank you. Thank you. I like to put this in its proper content. Juan Mascaro was 58 years old when he died in the prison right behind me. 58 years old. Now that's relatively young, considering that the longevity of men in the United States is closer to the mid-70s. However, since Cuomo took office, over 675 men and women have died in his prisons. The vast majority of them were people of color. And the average age at death was 58 years old. This is a humanitarian crisis that Governor Cuomo continues to ignore. A humanitarian crisis that happened under his watch, 58 years old, is longevity in his prisons. This is why clemency and releasing elder people in prison and those with underlying medical conditions is imperative, because men and women are already dying at a relatively young age. COVID-19 is projected to create havoc in New York State prison systems, just like the HIV virus did in the 80s and 90s, killed close to 900 incarcerated men and women. This virus is projected to do much more. If Governor Cuomo fails to act today, tomorrow may be too late. If he fails to act, he has in effect transformed his prisons into death camps. He must act now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. Next up, we're going to hear from somebody who knows all too well what death could look like in Sing Sing, somebody who was recently released from here, Ivan Calaff.
Good afternoon, everybody. I knew Juan. I was at Sing Sing for 13 years, and I knew Juan. I worked at the law library with him. He was a quiet guy. He's humble. We used to call him Columbia. May he rest in peace. He definitely didn't deserve this. I just want to say that at this point that I'm not anti anything or against anything. I think everyone here is for something. They're for life. They're for forgiveness. So, you know, giving people an opportunity to live. Excuse me, I'm a little emotional. We got to let our people go. We need political leaders that have testicular fortitude and are willing to do the right thing. 10 years from now, God forbid, 20 years from now, we have another crisis like this. Maybe the people can look back and say, okay, who did the right thing? Who handled this properly? And they'll look to New York and to the leaders in New York and say, you know what? We love the way New York did it. They did the right thing. They freed people. We just want the world to know that New York knows what justice looks like, right? Justice looks like mercy. It looks like forgiveness. And this is the perfect time for that. This is not time to buckle down and keep people incarcerated. I mean, we don't have the luxury of time. If this thing spreads the way, you know, it's been said it's going to spread, tens of thousands of people are going to die, horribly, unnecessarily, and I don't think anybody wants that on their hands. So, Cuomo, man, get some heart, get a set of balls, man, and do the right thing, man. We need you on this, and we need the rest of our political leaders. We need the courts. We need everybody, and it's not just about the men and women who are incarcerated. Like Dave said, it's about the officers, it's about the administration, it's about everyone. This affects everyone. So let's get on this together and let's do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. I want to just note really quickly that even before this pandemic hit, there were thousands of New Yorkers locked up in facilities across this state who should be free. They're scholars, their grandmothers, their partners. They should have been free a long, long time ago. But this pandemic, it makes their freedom that much more urgent. So next up, I want to call somebody who, before this pandemic, was fighting for the release of older people and people who were serving really long sentences. The president of Jim Al's Liberal Democratic Club, Alan Roskoff.
Hi, it's with great sadness that we're here today. Great sadness. People, the elderly and the infirm who are serving time should have been released before this pandemic. Governor Cuomo, you've been leading the nation with your press conferences, talking sense. bringing into everybody's living room information and knowledge. But you are falling short when it comes to people who are incarcerated. The prisons throughout this state are petri dishes for death. People cannot be separated. People are in dormitories. People eat together. People shower together. People have to sleep near each other. The prisons are not clean. They are not sanitized. You are going to be causing deaths. Needless. We don't need another Attica because people in prisons are watching people next to them die. Governor Cuomo, you need a heart. People need to be forgiven under normal circumstances, but with this pandemic, you have to show compassion. It would be understood nationwide if you did what other governors are doing in releasing people, the elderly, grandmothers, grandfathers, people with loved ones at home. Send them home, or you will have blood on your hands. You state that there's not a problem and things are under control, and you'll deal with it when you have to deal with it. Are you going to deal with it after dozens or hundreds of people are dead? Governor Cuomo, get a heart, step forward, and take care of this population. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Next up, we're going to have Roger Clark from Vocal, New York. Roger.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. For years, the Release of Aging People campaign has been calling on Cuomo to release the elder. And for good reasons, because even before this pandemic, there was dying in there. And now, like over a month ago, we've been ringing the alarm, telling both city jail, county jails, and state jails to release individuals who are vulnerable. I myself was in this jail over a decade ago. I was in this facility right here behind me, and I know how it is. All the quarters are tight. There is no way for you to do social distances. Even when you go to eat, you sitting extremely close to the next individuals, and everybody's at risk. So this falls squarely on the shoulder of Governor Cuomo. It's his fault as to why that elder man died on the 30th of this month, of last month. So we're calling on Cuomo. One death is too much. Please stop the carnage. He could do something about it. Release some of these people. Have a heart. Regardless of what you think, I believe in redemption. People do change. So that's what I'm calling on Cuomo to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Here.
Katie, can you still see us?
Yes.
Great. Next up, I'm going to ask Thomas Kearney, who's holding a sign that says, "Free Hans Early," another incarcerated elder who currently has cancer and is languishing in the prison system. Thomas.
Thank you.
I mean, Juan Mascaro's death is on Cuomo's hands already. That's one. How many more are going to have to die before you act? I've been behind this wall right here, and I know what these people have. They have nothing. 99.9% of the prison guards behind that wall don't give a shit about the captives that they are keeping watch over. They don't care. Governor Cuomo, you are showing right now that you do not care about New Yorkers. You don't care about our families. Granting clemency to the elderly, the infirm, those who are susceptible to this COVID-19 virus is not a free pass. It is not a get out of jail free card. Clemency is compassion. Show that you have some and let our elders go.
Here.
Oh, I took your phone.
Thank you, Thomas. You know, Thomas said that Governor Cuomo does not care. And I think that all his actions, especially over the last month, have pointed to that. Not only has he not granted a single clemency since the pandemic began, but over the last 3 days, he shoved down the throats of New Yorkers oppressive and unjust rollbacks to bail reform and discovery reform. 3 months after laws went into effect to balance the scales of justice, to ensure that people weren't locked up just because they couldn't pay bail. 3 months later, during a pandemic, he and the legislature, but under his leadership, rolled back on bail. Governor, we need you to take a step back and realize what you're doing to people and families all across this state. Right your wrongs by beginning to grant some clemencies to people who might die. So next up, and then we're going to do maybe a little bit of chanting before we have our last couple of speakers. I'd like to invite the Director of Community Engagement from the Parole Preparation Project, Anthony Dixon.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for coming out here today. It shows that you are not only concerned about people in New York, but the most vulnerable people that we have housed in New York State are people that come from oppressed neighborhoods. More than that, it's people that are elders that are the most vulnerable to this virus that has now hit planet Earth. We have criticized President Trump because he knew what was coming and he did hardly nothing. Well, our governor has criticized President Trump because of his neglect. But what about his neglect? He knew what was coming. We're here at Sing Sing, the closest prison. He knew that people would come here more faster from downstate. He knew, too, that there was a vast population of elderly people housed in this correctional facility. Sing Sing, it is notorious for housing the most vulnerable, most elderly people in this neighborhood. And yet he allowed, without granting clemency, for this man to die. How many more need to die in New York State prisons? Why are we playing Russian roulette with elderly people who are not sentenced to death? They were sentenced to a sentence of 5, 10, 20 years, not death. This virus is the death penalty for elderly people. This man died. That means that he had family that is hurting today, that cannot have a memorial service. How many more need to die in our prisons without memorial services? That we have to come out in front and make it count and say, not on our watch. There's around 10,000 more people in New York State prison that fall in this category. That will die unless Governor Cuomo do something. Progressive? Well, we have Iran, the president of Iran, granted over 30,000 clemencies. Iran. We have a governor that has not granted
more than 1,000. In fact, California Republicans across the nation is doing what this governor will not do. And you know, we know too that Governor Cuomo has a way of watching what happens before he reacts. He doesn't lead. He's the last one on the totem pole. We're tired of it. We're tired of it. Say it with me. We're tired of it. We're tired of it. Not on our watch. 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 Thank you. Thank you, Anthony. You know, Anthony raised two things that I think are really important to mention in this moment. One is the history of Sing Sing. And I think both the short-term history and the long-term is important to think about. Not only was this prison the death chamber for Juan Mascaro, but it was also the first facility in the state of New York's prison system where there was a positive COVID-19 case even before the death. And more historically, we know that this prison was home to the electric chair, where hundreds of incarcerated people were executed to death. The governor touts his and his father's legacy of being anti-death penalty. Well, he should know that the death penalty has evolved in New York State, and it's happening in the context of COVID-19 every day. Second, the governor's clemency legacy, as Anthony pointed out, compared to others, is dismal. Just last week, California Governor Gavin Newsom, in one day, granted 21 clemencies to people in California state prisons. That's the total number of clemencies that Cuomo's granted in his 9-year tenure as governor. That's a shame.
Shame on him.
That's a shame.
Shame on him.
How can he be a national leader and do that? How can he be outdone in one day and be a national leader? So I want to invite anybody who hasn't spoken yet. We can take maybe one or two people. I can understand that one or two people might want to speak as well. Is there anybody who hasn't spoken yet that wants to come to the mic?
Somebody.
I hold it.
Hi, I'm a lawyer and I work on trying to get people out on parole and clemency. I have a client who's an elderly gentleman. He has been told by a doctor recently that he has an increased risk for multiple reasons of death due to COVID. And we've been told by a parole commissioner that legally he should have been out over a year ago. We have been fighting to get him released. These are people in here, some of them legally they should be out, and ethically all of them should, that are at a heightened risk and are elderly and who pose no risk to safety. This needs to happen. Cuomo said, I watch him every day. Cuomo said that the God would judge every one of the leaders, and he seemed very, very comfortable and confident in how God would judge him. And I'm telling you, and I'm telling him, God will judge him for this one.
That's right. Thank you. I think last up, we're going to have Jollene and Russ. Jollene.
Hi there.
Hi.
Thanks for having me. On the way down here, I got a phone call from a woman who has a man inside of here. Her husband, they only had their first FRP just a month ago, before all this happened. He told her he had to go back to his cell because he wasn't feeling well. He's on A block, the same block that they left that man in there to drown and die in his own phlegm. All they gave him was Tylenol. All they gave that man was Tylenol. They left him in his cell to drown. They will leave the rest of our loved ones in these prison cells to drown in their own phlegm. Please turn your radio off, sir, out of respect for our loved ones. Wow.
I was in there.
So we're fighting for the people that are in there. We're fighting for the people that were in there.
Fuck you, cracker.
Anyway, like this woman called me on the way down here.
Don't fuck with me, white bitch. All you motherfuckers who suck my dick.
On the way down here, this woman called me crying hysterically. Her husband is sick. They're doing nothing for them. Nothing. They don't care about our loved ones. They've forgotten about them. In every press conference, Cuomo talks about how he cares for New Yorkers, how they need information, how we have to reduce density, how we have to test, how we have to do this and do that, but he's not doing it for our loved ones in prison. Yesterday, he called them special population. This is a new definition that we haven't even heard yet. Before that, they were considered invulnerable populations. Now the COs are given the option to wear a mask. It's not even mandatory for them to wear masks. They're the only contagion to our loved ones. They go home and they can infect the rest of the community. Sing Sing is close enough to the downstate population where there's access to care. In most of these rural communities, where these facilities lie, their communities were already struggling. Their hospitals were already struggling. And as Cuomo said, any hospital that was struggling prior to COVID is going to drown in COVID. Now our loved ones, our brothers, our sisters, our fathers and grandfathers are left in these prisons to drown. Absolutely, absolutely unacceptable. And I apologize to anyone that's listening online and needs to turn down their volume, but this is unacceptable. My husband is in there, and he's fairly healthy, and he's 44 years old, so he's not in one of these populations that we're talking about releasing. But regardless, everyone needs to be released. Everyone that has a clemency application needs to be considered for release. There is 6,500 applications in the Clemency Bureau right now. In January, I stood with some of these very same people and asked for clemency at a Virgil in front of Cuomo's mansion, and we were ignored. Two people were given commutations. He left the other 44,000 people in these prisons to die with COVID. At that time, this country knew that COVID was going to be a big, big problem. What are they doing now? Almost 3 months later. Let's do something. Give us a plan. Let them out. Clemency now. Free our elders. Let's get rid of this density. Let's save our people. Let our people go.
Let them go.
Let them go. Let them go.
Let them go. Let them go. Let them go. Let them go.
Let them go.
Thank you so much, Jollene. Mr. Russ deserves to be home just like so many others. If he's 44 or 24, if he's 84, if he's healthy, if he's sick, he should be home. And I'm sorry, Jollene, and I'm sorry for anybody who's tuning in for the disturbance that we had earlier, especially to you, Jollene. We need to stay in this together during this terrible time. So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to engage in a silent vigil. And we're going to engage in it with Mr. Juan Mascaro in our hearts and in our minds. And also the people that we're connected to and we love. And the people that we're not connected to and don't know. The 43,000 people in New York State prisons whose freedom is literally in Governor Cuomo's hands and on his desk. Let's engage in a 1-minute moment of silence, and then we're all going to get in our cars, and for those who don't have cars, that's okay, and we're going to make as much noise as we can to engage in a noise demonstration so that not only the people at Sing Sing, but also the people at Attica and Albion and Bedford Hills and Rikers and everyone all across this state who's locked up can hear us. So if everybody would please engage right now in that 1-minute moment of silence. and then we'll engage in the noise demonstration. Thank you. Thanks so much, everybody. Now, if everybody could get in their cars, and if you don't have cars, you can use your hands, you can use your feet. A couple of us have tambourines and drums if folks want those. And in 1 minute, when all of us are in our cars or ready, we're going to take 5 minutes and make as much noise as we can. I know a lot of us are feeling rage right now, and I want to let my rage out in the noise I'm going to make. So let yours out too. Thank you so, so much, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me? Thank you so, so much, everyone. I think we are proof to New York State and to the governor that not even a pandemic can stop this movement. That as long as people are locked up, as long as people are growing old and ill and dying, we are not going anywhere, pandemic or not. So thank you so much, everybody who's here in person. Thank you for everybody who's on the phone. Let's keep fighting. Because we know without a fight, Cuomo won't do anything. It's going to be our fight that makes him move. Thank you, everyone, and get home safe.